All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. And before I get into it, let me get this household business taken care of real quick. So check it out, you guys. Earlier, I was going through the community and I seen a comment, and it was basically to the effect of there were a couple of you that were wondering about the results of the raffle. Some of you were wondering who won, whatnot. Nothing was posted. Let me explain to you guys what happened. The short version. So originally we intended to run the raffle on Saturday night. However, when we went to run the raffle, YouTube was not putting our notifications out. So I decided to kick it over till Sunday. Sunday, we ended up running it. It was successful. It was a good turnout. We appreciate everybody that tapped in. However, when I run a raffle or a live, usually what I'll do is I'll record it and I'll drop it the next day. That's for anybody that wasn't able to tap in that night. They can watch it the next day, especially a raffle. They can go in the next day and find out who won, get the results like that. Now, the only reason why I didn't drop it yesterday, like I normally do, is because I was reading through some of the policies on YouTube, trying to figure out why they weren't giving out notifications. And I found out by accident that YouTube only gives out so many notifications per channel per day. So if you drop 2 or 3 videos in one day, and you try to drop a fourth one later, more than likely that fourth one nobody will get the notification for it. So with that said, me knowing that, I ended up sitting on the raffle recording because yesterday we intended on dropping some fresh content and I wanted to get that out to you guys first, then drop the raffle video after that. Well, yesterday we didn't get that out. Something came up, so it ended up getting sat on. But when I read that comment earlier, as soon as I read it, I want you guys to know who won the raffle. I want to get the results out to you guys. So as soon as I read it, I released it immediately. So hopefully that solved that problem. Anyways, on that same note, for those of you that won, tap in with either me or Sandman through the emails that I dropped or that I posted in the community and give us your mailing information so that we can get that stuff off to you guys. If you guys want something, I believe only 1 or 2 people have sent their addresses in. So we need to get that stuff mailed off to you guys. So tap in with us ASAP. The winner of I think it was Choco Loco, the winner of the weight pile, I will get with you in the next day or two. From what Sandman told me, you're going to be available to pick that up this weekend. I'm going to make sure that it can be coordinated with Jason, the individual that has the weights, that donated the weights to the raffle. So anyways, that's pretty much it on that. I also want to extend my appreciation to each and every one of you that have tapped in to my email with stories. I got an overwhelming response. I have stories on top of stories. You guys got some bangers coming. A lot of people tapped in. You guys will be surprised. Just trust me on that. You'd be surprised who's tapping in and the things that people are talking about. When I get some of these stories, it makes me wonder. I'm like, damn, it's crazy. It's crazy how things are. And the stuff that's going on out there on the main lines, it just don't stop. It only gets better. This story right here, it's a common everyday story that happens within these criminal organizations, Mexican Mafia and West of the Familia. It's, betrayal. Betrayal is something that happens all the time. I talk about things like, everybody being expendable from the bottom to the top. Anybody can get it. Anybody can get knocked down. How money is now the priority. Drugs is the priority. People get cannibalized, ate up, pushed out, stabbed out, shot out, pushed out, beat out. No, but on the serious though, betrayal is something that betrayal and deception go hand in hand. And these types of things that I'm going to talk about in this story right here happens practically every day in prison. Now, this individual that this story is about, he ended up getting hit. He got stabbed. I want to say it was around 9 or 10 times. And he got stabbed after he did a favor for a Mexican Mafia member. Matter of fact, it was Artie from King Cobras. So after he stabbed this individual, he ended up getting stabbed behind the circumstances of the stabbing. He ended up falling into question. People started questioning, what he was doing. And it's a good story. So I'm going to get into it. So like I said, this story that happened right here, it was about a Sureño. I'm going to call him Smokey. It was about a Sureño named Smokey from Ontario that ended up getting stabbed on one of the shoe yards behind a favor that he did for the Mexican Mafia, for Artie Guzman from King Cobras. And, he fell into question, but he ended up getting betrayed. And this ended up leading to his defection. Over time, his heart wasn't in it anymore. Once you get turned on like that, your own people turn on you, especially when you're somebody that's striving. This is something that you put everything into. You give up your kids, you believe in it, you breathe it, eat it, talk it, walk it. You're out there on the streets, you live for it, you're trying to generate money for this organization, and then you get turned on. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard pill to swallow. Your own brothers, the cats that you're willing to die for, turn on you and hurt you. They stab you, they hurt you, and they betray you. And it's something that it'll wear on you over time. Even if you continue to try to push on with your career, you try to keep believing. A lot of the times individuals that get into situations like that, they just blame those specific individuals that were involved in their incident. They're like, it's just a select few that were involved, but I'm not gonna be bitter and take this out on all the Sureños or all the Norteños or on the entire organization. There's just a couple bad seeds that were in cahoots and were specifically involved in my situation, and that's what it is. And even though a lot of the times we know that that's a lie, that's what we need to tell ourselves to continue pushing forward. It's hard. You got to turn your back on these dudes. You got to go out to these exercise yards where people have knives. You got to be able to trust them. And once you've been hurt like that, once you've been stabbed, it takes a certain kind of individual to be able to go back out there and continue to give your back to these dudes, knowing that you can get stabbed again. Politics are dirty. You never know. Somebody can tell you, after they whack you, somebody can tell you until they're blue in the face, hey, you're good, bro. Nothing's going to happen. Come back, whack this individual, and, that'll be your cleanup, and we'll embrace you, and it'll all be good. Honestly, you don't know whether to believe that or not. You don't know if it's true or not. Your heart wants to believe that it is, and a lot of the times, those that are committed, they'll believe it, and they'll continue to push either to get stabbed again or, to continue on and be a part of that organization, maybe for an extended period of time until you end up getting into a wreck again, and then something else happens. I don't know, but I got some crazy stories that deal with something like that I'm going to tell you guys about in the next day or two. You guys are going to trip out on that one. And these individuals are still around, so they're not going to be liking this story. Anyways, so like I said, this guy who I'm going to refer to from this point on, because he doesn't want to be named or identified, I'm going to call him Smokey from Ontario. He's from Ontario, but I'm going to call him Smokey. So he ends up getting stabbed in Corcoran SHU. He got stabbed on the yard. I want to say they hit him like 9 or 10 times. And, after that incident, he ended up coming back. He came back, continued to program, but the betrayal that he felt, the level of betrayal, it ended up wearing on him over time. The individuals that did that to him, the ones that were responsible for putting a green light on him, they wouldn't even give him the respect of telling him why, or even admitting it. They denied it, and this just made him feel betrayed even more, to the point where eventually his heart wasn't in it anymore, and he walked away. But I'm going to tell you guys what happened. I'm going to walk you guys through it. Like I said, the one thing that stands out about this guy in this story is that for a lot of guys, once they get whacked, once they're out there on the yard and they get stabbed or they get packed out, whatever it is, a check, whatever, it's one and done. Once they get violated that first time, a lot of them, they won't come back, and it's understandable. Each and every individual is different. Me, myself, I'm one of those guys that ended up coming back, even though what they did with me wasn't really considered. I wouldn't even consider it that I got moved on. I got a phone thrown at me, and I got a channel changer, came within a couple of inches of hitting me. But still, the threat was there, the intentions were there, and I still came back. There's a lot of guys that won't come back, but that just goes to show you guys that, the level of commitment. This guy right here, he obviously was a true believer. For him to get stabbed the way he did and to come back says a lot about his character and about what type of individual he is. He's a stand-up type of dude. The other thing that stands out about this guy is that when he got stabbed on the yard in Corcoran, it went undetected. It basically went undetected. The tower didn't see it. And, after he came back to consciousness, because he ended up getting knocked out, and then he also got stabbed. But the shooters, the ones that were involved in his incident, were over by the shower washing the blood off. And, he staggered over there to the shower and he tried to shake their hands. And he went over there to wash the blood off because he was leaking. He was leaking bad. And at first they tripped out. They didn't know what to do. They looked at him like he was crazy. But he was like, hey, it's good, bro. I'm not mad at you guys. You guys are following instructions. I would have did you the same way. If they would have put a green light on you, I would have got you too. I mean, that's the way it works. It's either me or you. So I'm not mad at you guys. I just want to know who the fuck, who put a green light on me and for what? What did I do? But, that's the other thing that stands out about him. So this individual, Smokey, was serving a life sentence. I don't remember what his case was about, but what ended up leading him to go to prison or catch a life case. But he's in prison, he's doing life, and he was working under Artie Guzman, and he was one of his primos. So he was somebody that was working for him for a while, and he did a lot of favors for Artie. This was somebody that he looked up to. Artie was somebody that he admired. Artie, he was a big homie, and he told me he was proud to work for him. He's like, I was doing my thing. There was nothing that I wouldn't do for that brother. If he asked me to stab somebody, I stab him. If he asked me to jump, I'd ask him how high. So he was loyal. So at the time that this story took place, this guy Smokey was in Corcoran in the SHU program for 9 years. At that point, he was there for about 9 years. And he was part of the leadership. At one point, he was part of the mesa. In his building, he was the llavero at one time. He had that building, and he'd always been part of the leadership there. He's somebody that had been around. He knew how the politics worked. He knew how Artie wanted, he knew how he wanted his buildings ran. And Artie always put him in a position. So I want to say he got to Corcoran around 2006, and he went to, it was 4B2 left. That's the building that they put him in. I know these buildings, they're always flipping. Sometimes, they're validated guys in 4B4 left. Then they might flip them and put, make it a PC building. Then they might flip it back. But at that time when he was there, he was in 4B2 left. So when Smokey first got there, he moved in with the Sureño that was a llavero in that building. He had the keys to that section, and he was short to the house. So, during the last couple of weeks while he was there, he basically passed everything over to Smokey. He was like, look, this is who's here. These are the rosters. This is, what's going on over here. These are the channels. He passed everything over to him so that it would be a smooth transition and he would know how to run that building. So that's what they did during the last couple of weeks. So when this individual went home, he basically passed everything over to this guy. And Smokey said, you know what? I really didn't want to do it because I just didn't want to, continue to be involved in the politics. But, I understood they wanted somebody that had been there for a while, and they wanted somebody that, was going to be there. And he was a lifer. So when his celly paroled, he basically stepped up and he took over. So not long after Smokey Celly paroles, a paisa ends up moving into that section. I guess this paisa was one of those kind of paisas that functioned with the sureños. He was on their gallo, and he was somebody that obviously functioned with them on some level because he was looking for a sureño to move in with, but he was referred to as a paisa. Smokey would find out later that this paisa was actually out there on the line making money for Artie, and he would get caught up in some bullshit. But when this paisa came in, he was looking for, a celly, somebody to move in with. So this paisa, he's looking for a celly. And come to find out, there was a filter that was being circulated within that building about this paisa. And it was basically saying that he was a snitch, that he was cooperating out there on the main line. That's all that was said. There was no paperwork to substantiate it. All it said was that he was a snitch and that, they wanted him to move in with a lifer. As far as a filter like that that's being put out by a Mexican mafia member, technically a Mexican mafia member, they don't have to produce verification that somebody's a snitch. They don't have to produce the paperwork and filter that around to the manpower. Just based on the fact that, this individual is a Mexican mafia member, that's proof enough right there. He doesn't need to substantiate it. And the reason why I say that is because if you guys remember, I put out a story about Rascal that was in High Desert, and he had a habit of saying that he was getting kites from the back, which is like leadership, headquarters, the whole, and that, when he get these kites, instead of letting another sureño look at these kites to verify that there was somebody that was on there that actually had a green light, he would just destroy the kite and just tell the rest of the sureños on the yard, this guy's got a green light. That's not normal practice. Normal practice is to put another set of eyes on there so that there's somebody else, another sureño out there that can say, you know what, I seen the kite. There was, a green light that was put on this individual. I can vouch for it. I stamp it. I seen it. But a Mexican mafia member, an NF member, AB member, they don't have to do that. Just based on their status alone, that's proof enough, and that will suffice. And even though that individual, Rascal, I think he was from San Bernardino, even though he was a primo, that's still not normal practice. When a green light gets put on somebody like that, that's why he has a mess out there, so that, he has a circle, and those individuals that are considered his inner circle, they're the ones that should be privy to that kind of stuff. And that's to cover his ass as well. Because if somebody gets hit out there and, come later on, somebody says that they never gave a green light, well, you have somebody else out there on the yard that can say, you know what, no, I seen that kite. There was a filter that came from the back, and it said that Joe Blow had a green light on him. So it's all about covering his ass as well. But that's how protocol works out there. So this paisa comes in, and like I said, word comes from the higher ups that this dude's got to go because he's a snitch. That's all that was said. It's a general, it's a basic filter, and it's regarding this paisa. At that time, Smokey said that leadership or headquarters were in 4B3 right. So he didn't even know who it came from at the time. He just knew that it came from headquarters. There wasn't nobody that signed off on it. It was just, leadership. So like I said, the plan at that time, at that point, was to move him in with a lifer. Move him in with a lifer so that a lifer could take care of it. And the whole purpose of this is because, if it goes bad, if they put a green light on this dude and it ends up going bad in the cell, obviously that's consideration for, some of their manpower. They don't want somebody that has a date catching a live case behind a removal, or this dude ended up taking it too far and he kills him in the cell. A lifer has nothing to lose. all they can do is, they can take him back to court. They can give him another life sentence. They can give him another 10, 15 years, whatever. On administrative level, they can give him 10, 15, 20, 115s, and it doesn't mean nothing. So that's the whole purpose of, delegating this to a lifer, is because they can't do nothing to a lifer. There's no consequences. Smokey, so when Smokey gets this filter, he's been there for a while. It's been a minute since he put in some work, so he doesn't mind taking care of it. He's like, you know what? I don't mind getting my feet wet. He's like, fuck it. It's been a while since I put in some work. I'm doing life. I'm not sure what the status of his appeals were, but you never even mentioned it. Never mentioned nothing about his appeal. And a lot of the times, a lot of lifers, they'll use their appeal as an excuse to try to get out of, putting in work or making a sacrifice. Man, I got my appeals in the courts right now. I don't want to fuck this up. Or, going to board. A lot of the times, those are reasons why cats will end up checking in, because they have a board hearing coming up the following year. They want to go home, or because they have, their cases in the courts. But none of that came up. Smokey was on board with it, and he was like, cool, just let me know. Not only that, but, Artie, being that Artie was there and Smokey had an immense amount of respect for Artie, he was like, you know what, the brother's back there. I'm going to do this favor for him. He was looking at it as it was coming from Artie. And the other Mexican Mafia members that were back there, a lot of them had a lot of influence, but it was something that was kind of known that Artie was the one that was pretty much running Corcoran at that time. Even though he was back there with some other guys, some other Mexican Mafia members. I believe Thuri was back there. Mike Boo from Norwalk was back there. There were a couple others, but in his mind, he was doing that favor for Artie. And later on, he would find out that it was Artie that actually sanctioned that green light, and it was because of something that happened out there on the main line that affected Artie's financial situation. So I'm going to get into that. Matter of fact, the only two Mexican Mafia members that I think were back there that I didn't mention. So it was Artie from King Cobras. Turi from Cucas was back there. You had, at this time, Güero Verde from Verdugo was still alive. Then you had Roland from San Diego and Mike Boo from Norwalk. So you had those 5 Mexican Mafia members back there. And a lot of those guys are higher ups. They're Mexican Mafia members that have been in the mix. All 5 of them were deep in the mix. So all 5 of these guys were reputable Mexican Mafia members. So Smokey signs off on the paperwork necessary in order to facilitate the move. There's like a cell slip that you got to sign. I don't know how they do it in Corcoran now, but before you used to have to, they called it a marriage slip, where, the CO would come over and ask you if you wanted to sell up with this individual. You sign off on it, and 9 times out of 10, they do the move later. It got complicated over the years because a lot of dudes were killing their cellies up, at least up in the Bay. I'm not sure about Corcoran, but up in the Bay, it started to get hard to get a cellie. You had to put a marriage slip in. That had to go to Sacramento. Classification had to look at it. They had to look in your folders, both of them, yours and the individual you wanted to sell up with, make sure that there were no enemy concerns or nothing like that. And then they would move them in with you. But it was a lengthy process that took some time. But anyway, he signs off on it. The Paisa signs off on it. But prior to moving this Paisa in with them, Smokey, he obviously knew that this guy was in hot water, and that this wasn't going to be, the typical welcoming of somebody that he was glad to see, like another Sureño. It wasn't going to be like, hey, this is another a cool homie that's moving in with me. It wasn't going to be like that. He was going to have to, play that role, act like everything was all good, play this guy out of pocket, rock him to sleep, make him feel comfortable in the cell. So that's what he did. Later on that day, they ended up moving the Paisa in with them. Paisa moves in, and, it's like any other celly. Paisa comes in, he helps him with this stuff. He's like, hey, bro, you're right here. You're up on the top bunk. This is your locker right here. You can have that shelf space right there. Anything you want down here, you're welcome to. This is where the cleaning. So he's going over the whole cell with them. That's what you do when somebody moves in with you. And, at the same time, he's doing this to make this Paisa feel comfortable. Like I said, to rock him to sleep. So You know, the Paisa, he's making his bunk, and you know, they're talking. They're he got him engaged in conversation, talking about whatever he's talking about. Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers. So they're in there, you know, they're in there talking, and Smokey is just waiting for official confirmation. He's waiting for that kite to come in to say it's a go, whack this fool. So until then, it's you know, it's a little awkward in there, but Smokey's been through this before. He knows what it entails, and you know, this is something that once you've done it once, you know how it goes. There's not no real science to it. You're playing on the element of surprise. You're trying to make somebody feel comfortable, not necessarily going to snake the dude. You know, some cats might have to do it like that, but you know, you're just waiting for that official confirmation and then beast on the dude. So he's waiting. He's waiting for that kite to come through. So at some point, another Sureño on the tier, he calls Smoke, and he's like, hey, homie, he's like, down low, I got one time coming to you. One time coming to you means he's got a kite coming. So Smokey shoots his line out there. Boom. They connect. He pulls the one time in. He reads it. There it is. It's official. Go ahead. This Spicer got a green light. Do your thug thizzle. So, you know, at that point, unless he was just half crazy and just like ripped up the kite, threw it in the toilet, looked at the Paisa and just ping, 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 boom, ping, boom, ping, boom. Unless he just beasted on him like that, or he finessed it where, you know, he read it, ripped it up, went on about, you know, his business like he would have read any other kite. So not to alert the Paisa. So I'm sure that, you know, prior to the Paisa moving in, Smokey had his piece somewhere that was in, you know, reach. He had everything planned out. I'm gonna put it right here under the, you know, the corner of my mattress, and I'm gonna get him somewhere in the cell. He had to have had a plan. He had to have had a plan. So it's go time. Smokey grabs his piece and he goes in on the Paisa. Bing, bop, beep, bop, beep, bop, oh, boof, boom, dip, bop, beep, bop, boop, oh, shoot, beep, bop, boop. So he starts going in on this cat. He's giving him helicopter kicks, donkey kicks, Superman punches, flying helicopter kicks. He's whooping this Paisa's ass, and you know, they end up hearing it. The COs end up hearing it. They run up there, and however it went, they separated him. They cuff him up, take him out. They separated him. So at that point, he did what he was supposed to do. He honored, you know, the directive. He did it. He hit this Paisa, and you know, that should have been the end of it right there. But unfortunately, it wasn't. You know, the thing I forgot to tell you guys is he did, matter of fact, I remember, he did tell me that the plan that he concocted for this Paisa is that the next morning, he didn't do it that same day. He waited till the next morning until it was time to work out. What he did was he got the Paisa to do some burpees with him, some exercises. And the whole purpose for doing that was to get his blood pumping. This way, if he hit a major artery, that, you know, he would bleed out. So at some point when they're working out, I'm gonna go ahead and give it to you guys again. Bing, bop, beep, boop, bop. Oh, shoot. Boop, boop, pop, pop. So he whacks him, and like I said, he honored the directive, and they split him up. But that wasn't the end of it. You know, unfortunately for Smokey, this favor that he did for Artie would end up, you know, turning into all kind of turmoil for him. So, you know, according to Smokey, even though he hit the Paisa, he did his thing. He did what he was supposed to do. Even though he hit him and he had intentions on you know, a good hit, he was like, you know what? It wasn't that good of a hit. You know, I failed. Obviously, the dude didn't die. He whacked him. The Paisa was leaking, but it was considered a fail. So, you know, he knew that he was going to get questioned about that, and he knew that they were going to look at it as a fail. I told you guys before, under some certain individuals, you know, when they put a green light on somebody, sometimes, you know, if they don't kill this individual or they don't hurt him really bad, it's considered a fail. I've told you guys stories where that ended up resulting in them getting whacked because it was a fail. Whether they thought they did it purposely, they didn't want to really go in on them, or for whatever reason, it ended up costing them their career. That's crazy, but it happens. So the thing that really messed Smokey up is it was like a day after he hit this spice up. They ended up pulling him out to go back to the county jail for court. It was like the next day, and that looked suspicious. It looked like, according to him, it looked like he had rolled it up. He had been waiting for LA County Jail to call him back because they forgot to sentence him for some time. And they just so happened to do it the following day. The timing couldn't have been worse because when they walked him out of the unit, everybody else, the Sureños that were in that pod, they looked at it like, bro, where you going? And he was like, I'm going out to court. And it was bad timing. But that's the reality of it. Somebody like that shouldn't be questioned like that. If they really trust this brother, they really had trust in him and they really give him the benefit of the doubt. Would you want to be trusted? He had no control over that. But it looks suspicious, and because it looks suspicious, it would end up having an adverse effect on him. So he goes out to court. He goes back to court. He ends up getting convicted for the years that, they forgot to sentence him on, and then he ends up coming back. The other thing that he did say, though, too, is that when they called him, he knew it was going to look funny. So he started telling, the other Sureños on the tier, he started telling them anything and everything, to basically ease their concerns. Like, look, this is what happened, and I got this case. And, he was trying to, before he left, he was trying to make sure that he was good by giving them as much information as he could. But, when a lot of the times when you're under suspicion like this, it falls on deaf ears. It's almost like cats want to see you fail. Once they get that thought in their mind, they run with it. And it sounds like that's what happened in this situation. Everything he was telling them, they were like, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, and then he ends up going out. He goes out to court. And like I said, then he would end up coming back once he went to court. He picked up that, I think he said it was another 10 or 15 years that they forgot to sentence him to. It has something to do with his credits or something like that. Anyways, that's what happened. But the funny thing is when he comes back, he ends up in a pod where, one of Artie's secretaries was in that pod. And the secretary tells Smokey that they wanted him to step up and for his cellie to step down. I guess Smokey ended up moving into a cell with another Sureño that had the keys to that building. But Artie's secretary said, hey, you know what? Tell your cellie to step down. You step up. And Smokey, his whole, his thinking was, look, they knew I knew how to run the building. They knew that I had a lot of experience. And, I'm somebody that worked for Artie for, many years. So at that point, Smokey thought that, well, everything must be good. They're putting me in a position, but he still felt like, I still need to keep an eye open, man, because the way that I left, that shit could end up coming back on me. So he steps up and he resumes his responsibilities. He starts running that building again. So the cellie he ended up with was an individual named Sapo from Sinaloa. I imagine he was a Sureño. That's who he ended up selling up with when he came back, was Sapo from Sinaloa. And the thing that Smokey said that, when he was in the building with Sapo and they would just be in there chopping it up amongst each other, one of the things that they started to realize was that there was a lot of division within that building, not only with Artie, the secretaries, and the things that were going on within their household, the Sureños. There just seemed like there was a lot of division. There was a lot of, they were bumping heads. And this was something that he obviously seen. Somehow, I don't know what he seen, what he heard, but this was something that they picked up on. So anyway, out of nowhere, they end up getting a kite. It's from another Sureño on the tier, and it's a directive. And the directive basically tells Sapo and Smokey that they wanted them to move into a corner cell. I want to say it was up top. It was either up top or it was on the bottom, but I believe it was up on top. They wanted them to move into that corner cell. And, when Smokey, when he read that directive, he said it didn't make sense because the corner cells, those are fishing cells. Those are relays right there. They're not really for somebody that, you know, is part of leadership. They're for somebody that's you know, a little bit further down on the totem pole. All day long, they're going to be shooting lines back and forth through sections. See, on that corner cell right there, they can go under the door to the next section over. So that person is going to be, whoever's in that cell is going to be fishing all day. And that's all they do all day, is they're just a relay. So to him, it didn't make sense. He was like, you know what? That was the first thing that I picked up on that just didn't seem right. Why did they want us to move from where we were at up to this corner cell? It didn't make sense. But he was like, you know what? I followed the directive. I'm just like, you know what? Okay, we'll see how this plays out. But what's the purpose for it? He couldn't make sense of it. So he couldn't reach a logical conclusion of why they wanted him to move to that cell, other than there was something going on. But like Smokey said, you know, when you've been doing time as long as I have, and when you've been in the trenches and you've dealt with politics on both sides of it, you just kind of you get that sense, that sixth sense when something's wrong. And you know, he said he got that when they moved into that cell. That was the first thing that happened in the course of, you know, there was a couple of other things that happened behind that, but that was one of the first things that happened where he just got that funny feeling, that sinking feeling that something's not right. I've talked about that before. You know, something changes in the monotony. You know, somebody's character changes. Somebody, you know, they don't look at you, or you know, it's when they look at you, or it's the lack of communication. There's different things that will cue you in on things like that. You just know that something's up when something breaks the monotony. Something's out of the ordinary. Somebody's character, you know, you can pick that up in the climate, especially when you've been doing time for you know, many years, and you've been back there in them SHU programs, and you've played cats, you've rocked cats to sleep. All those things are telltale signs. So him and Sapo, they go with it. They move into the corner cell, and you know, they're up there. That's where they're housed now. So he ends up going to yard. They go out to the yard, and this is the group yard. This is back when they used to let everybody out to one of the big yards where we used to go out there and we had the gladiator fights. These yards are shaped like pies, pieces of pies. So at this time, you know, he goes out there to I want to say one or two group yards, and everything was cool. Nothing was happening out there. You know, everything felt normal. You know, they went out there, they did their routine, they worked out, they played handball. It was a normal yard. That was the first 2 yards. I think he said he went out for the first 2 and everything was good. But even though nothing happened out there, he still said he felt like something was still going on. There was something bothering him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt like there was still something up. So when he goes out to the 3rd yard, he said that's when everything felt different. Everything felt different from the minute he stepped out on the yard. He just felt like something was wrong. The movement wasn't the same. You know, everybody was kind of posted up with their backs against the walls. Nobody was playing handball. That day they called RDO, regular day off. That means no routine, nobody's working out. It's just a regular day just to kick back. But usually when they call an RDO, they're either, whatever they're doing out there, they either play handball, basketball, whatever they're doing. But nobody was doing nothing that day. Everybody was just kind of posted up. And on top of that, everybody wasn't being as social with them as they had normally been on the other yards. There was a big change in, you know, people looking at them, people kind of just glancing at the wrong times, and those types of things right there, they start sending up flags. And I mean, come on, think about it. I know that there's going to be some of you that will probably say, you know what, I would have got off right there. As soon as I started picking up on those signs, those flags, I would have got off. And that sounds good. But if you're somebody that really cares about your career, you're somebody that doesn't want to fall into bad standings, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? That sixth sense, a lot of times you're on point. It's something that it's a gift that a lot of us have. We're able to pick up and detect things like that. It's just that strong sense of feeling that something's wrong. But what if you are wrong? What if you take off only to find out that, like, motherfuckers are saying, you're a JCat, bro. Why'd you take off? It's like there was nothing going on with you. So I'm sure that crossed his mind, you know, when he started to feel like things were going bad. He probably felt like, damn, I should just blitz right now, take off, and be done with it. But Smokey had been in the game for a while. He'd been functioning for years. At that point, he'd been in Corcoran for 9 years. And, you know, before that, he was out there on the lines. And like I said, he was working under Artie. So this was somebody that was deeply rooted in his, not just his commitment as a Sureño, but, you know, underneath a Mexican mafia member. He was somebody that was in the politics. So he just, when he got those feelings, he just told himself, you know what, you're probably tripping, and just continued to just, you know, run his yard like he did every other time he was out there. You know, like he said, up until that point, you know, he'd been there for 9 years. Up until that point, they had worked out every yard. It was like mandatory. They never took an RDO. Never. I want to say he said it was like once or twice there was something going on where it was weather related or something, but that it just never happened. And even then, when they did, the homies would play handball. The Sureños, his homies would play handball. But the fact that nobody even wanted to play handball and everybody was just kind of waiting around, they told him that, okay, they're waiting for something to happen. What other explanation is there for everybody kind of posted up? You know, the writing was on the wall. So now he's got his head on a swivel. He's got his head on a swivel, and, you know, he looks around, and one of the other things that stood out about, you know, the yard when he looked around is that he's seen his old celly, one of his old cellies, a guy named Gallo. They had him in one of the corners and they were talking to him. They were probably telling him, hey, we're about to take off on Smokey. This is a sanction, you know, it's coming from, you know, leadership, and it is what it is. So after he seen that they had his old celly Gallo in one of the corners of the yard, he said that the next thing that he seen that was just obvious is that they had his current celly, Sapo. They had him in another corner of the yard and they were talking to him. But the thing that really cued him in is when he looked over there, Manny, there was a guy named Manny, a Sureño named Manny, that was part of the mess up. Manny was talking to Sapo, and when he was talking to Sapo, Sapo was looking down at the ground. And as soon as he looked over there, he said Sapo turned towards him. He looked at him and he turned around real quick and looked at the ground. He was like, as soon as I seen that look, as soon as I seen that glance, I knew I was the one that was going to be hit on the yard that day. I knew I was the target. It was official. And again, I know a lot of you are going to say he should have took off right there. Maybe he should have. Maybe he should have, because that right there, it probably was a pretty good telltale sign. It was official. But I'm sure, you know, Smokey was probably hoping that he was wrong. So what Smokey did was, when he seen that glance, he's like, you know what? I just felt fucked up. You know, I got sick to my stomach. I felt that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. He's like, I grabbed my bedroll, his shower roll, we call them bed rolls. So he had his shower roll, and he said he looked up at the gunner, and the gunner usually was always in that window. The only time the gunner would leave the window is if he had to go to the bathroom or he went to go grab something real quick, open somebody's door. But for the most part, he would stay on the window so that he could watch the movement of the yard. So he looked up and he seen the gunner up there, and the gunner was posted. And then a minute later, the gunner, he turned around, he walked away. So it was at this point that Smokey started to walk towards the shower area. As he got close to the shower area, he said out of his peripheral, he seen somebody rushing him. He seen him rush him. He didn't know who it was because he didn't look at their face. He looked at their hands. He said he concentrated on their hands. That's all he was worried about. He seen somebody rush him, and Boom, they barrel into him and it's on, right? Ping, pop, ping, pop, ping, pop, boom, ping, pop, 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 right? So they're going in on him. Then he said he seen somebody else. He got spun around and he seen a second guy come at him. And he did the same thing. He didn't look at who it was. He looked at his hands. That's what he was concentrating on. He was watching their hands to make sure that they didn't have a piece. And he didn't see a piece. But it was at that point that he got knocked out. Somebody cracked him and he went out cold. He was unconscious. So he's out. They're on him. Bing, bop, bing, bop, 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 bing, bop, bing, bing, bop, 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 bop. So they're giving him the business. And I guess one did have a piece. I don't know when it came out. Maybe it was the third guy. But they ended up hitting him 11 times. They got him good. And they got him when he was knocked out on the ground. So, you know, at some point he regains consciousness and he pops up. He pops up and he's leaking. He's leaking everywhere. He looks around and everybody's got their back against the wall and they're kind of just all looking at him. And you know, other cats are trying to act like, you know, they're continuing to go on with their yard, acting like they're not watching, but they're watching. Everybody's watching. When something happens out there on the yard, when somebody gets stabbed, everybody tries to get away from that area and they try to act like, you know, they're going on with whatever they're doing, but they can't stop from looking. They're rubbernecking. It's just like people on the freeway when they see a car crash, they're looking for a dead body. They're looking for brain matter all over the, you know, the concrete. It's the same way. So, you know, they're kind of glancing over at him and he staggers around. His thing was, you know what? I needed to get to the shower to wipe the blood off. The gunner didn't see shit. It went undetected. So at that point, he starts to walk towards the shower. So he gets over to the shower and the two shooters, they're at the shower. One of them's getting rid of the piece, flushing the piece, and the other one is washing the blood off him. And I want to say he said it was Shorty from Inland Empire and Crazy Boy from San Bernardino. Those were the two shooters. So, you know, he walks over there, he's leaking, and he walks over there and he tries to shake their hands. Imagine that. He walks over, he tries to shake their hands, and they're looking at him at first, like he said, they were looking at me like they didn't know what to do. They were like confused, like, what the fuck? You know, he tries to shake their hands and he tells them, he's like, hey, don't trip. It's all good. I'm not tripping. I'm not mad at you guys. You guys did what you were supposed to do. He was like, man, if it was me, I would have got you too. You know, if they would have shot me a directive and told me to stab you, it would have been either you or me, and it wouldn't have been me. So I'm not mad at you. He's like, but I want to know, what the fuck did I do? I want to know who put this green light on me. And they wouldn't tell him nothing. They wouldn't give him no names. They wouldn't tell him who authorized it. All they told him is that it was coming from the top. That's it. I think it was 3B, 3 left. Whatever I told you guys leadership was at earlier. I want to say it was 3B, 3 left. So, you know, they don't tell him nothing. He starts washing the blood off. He starts washing the blood off, and he stayed posted up by the shower because he was leaking. So he's out there on the yard, and you know, he tried to shake these guys' hands. So when I'm talking to him, I ask him, I'm like, bro, I'm confused. So it seems a little abnormal because, you know, when they move on you, usually they stay on you until they start shooting, till the tower starts shooting, or, you know, until it's over. Until, you know, they hit you good and you're out, and, you know, they walk away from it. But, you know, the fact that you walked up and you tried to shake their hand, how come they didn't take off on you again? Was this a check? Is that what it was? And he was like, yeah, that's what it was. It was a check. I never heard of a check with the pedazo, but I don't know, maybe that's how, you know, the Sureños, maybe that's how they get down. I don't know. I'm learning a lot of this stuff myself. But anyways, he was like, yeah, it was a check, you know. So I asked him, so they were okay with you staying out there on the yard? And he was like, yeah, you know, that was it. They gave me my issue. You know, I got poked, and that was it. So I was like, okay, that's a trip, man. You know, I know that the NF, Norteños, they don't do that. There's no check. Once the hammer's dropped on you, that's it. You're done. You know, you don't get, there's no hands-on, there's no poke you a couple of times. And once it's decided that you have to go and that, you know, you are a target, it's balls to the wall, you're done. So like I said, Smokey, you know, he tried to ask these guys, you know, he wanted at least know why he got hit, you know, the reasons why and who hit him, who had him hit. But they wouldn't tell him nothing more than that it came from the top, 3 right. That's it. So, you know, he stayed there until the end of the yard recall. Then the yard, he ended up putting his t-shirt on and wiped the blood off as best he could. And they escorted him back into the building. It went completely undetected. The officers that escorted him back in the building, they didn't see no blood. They didn't see no stab wounds. He had it all hidden under his t-shirt. Luckily, they didn't hit him in the face or in the neck. It was all, I guess it was all body shots or places where, you know, they couldn't see it because it went undetected. So, you know, the only other thing that I remember he told these Sureños, he's like, well, you know, since you guys don't know who did this to me or who called this, he's like, well, you guys do your homework, I'm gonna do mine. So anyways, now he's back in the building. He's back in the building, he's in his cell, he made it to his cell. Again, it went undetected. They didn't see nothing, the gunner didn't see nothing. So now he's in there nursing his own wounds. He's in there, he washes up and, you know, bandages himself up the best he can and tries to heal himself. I want to say it was the same day, it was later that same day after he had washed up, you know, took a bird bath and was just kicking back in the cell. An officer comes up to his door and tells him, he's like, hey, cuff it up. I need you to come out. So I want to say it was the same day, later on that day. You guys, mind you, he still has a cellie. Sapo still is cellie. So, you know, they're in the cell and a CO comes up to the door and he tells him, he's like, hey, he's like, the sergeant wants to talk to you. And Smokey tells him, he's like, about what? And the CO tells him, he's like, I don't know. He's like, he wants to talk to you. I need to pull you out. And Smokey tells him, nah, he's like, I'm not coming out. And the CO tells him, he's like, look, man, if you don't come out, we're gonna come in there and get you, and then we're gonna search your cell, we're gonna tear your shit up. So at that time, Smokey and Sapo, apparently they had weapon stock. They were safeguarding weapon stock in there, and they didn't want to get caught with it. So he had to come out of the cell. It was decided by him and the cellie. It was like, hey, go, bro, go, just go. Otherwise, they're gonna come in there, they're gonna take this shit. So he cuffs up. He goes down there to see what the sergeant wants, and the sergeant tells him, I'm putting you in single cell, putting you on single cell status due to safety concerns. That's it. And, you know, they okey-doked him. It was at that point that he's like, what are you talking about? Why are you putting me on single cell status? He's like, there's no reason for me to be on single cell status. I have a cellie right now. He's like, why are you guys doing this? And the sergeant was like, it's just safety concerns. We can't talk about it. That's all I can tell you. And he emphatically tells him, I'll sign a waiver. I'll sign anything that I need to sign, saying that, you know, I don't have no problems, that I'm good. But they're telling him, nah, you know, at this point, there's nothing that you can say that's going to change our minds. You're going on single cell status, and that's the end of it. So he can't do nothing about it. This looks bad now. Again, it puts him under a cloud of suspicion. These guys are wondering, like everybody else in there, they're wondering why they pull him out. You know, there's rules, there's policies, and that's what he was trying to honor. You don't go out when they come up and ask you to, you know, the sergeant wants to talk to you, the lieutenant wants to talk to you. You're not to agree to something like that. When you go and talk to a CO, a sergeant, a lieutenant, you're supposed to have somebody there with you so that they can listen in on the conversation. You don't go by yourself and have conversations, secret squirrel conversations. That'll get you caught up. But again, in this situation, they had the weapon stock. It was kind of one of those things. They played him out of the cell. They okey-doked him. So now he's back under a cloud of suspicion. But it is what it is. He can't do nothing. He reports it. He lets him know, look, this is what happened. And that's all he can do. So like I told you guys earlier, you know, at this point, at some point, he finds out that Artie, you know, Artie from King Cobras, the Mexican mafia member that he looks up to, that he admires, that it came from him. And keep in mind, he's, you know, he stabbed the paisa for Artie. He did this favor for Artie. But now he's hearing that Artie's the one that put that green light on him. He's the one that had him hit. So he feels a level of betrayal that he's never felt before. Again, this was somebody that's deeply rooted, you know, he was deeply rooted in you know, his beliefs as far as being a sureño, being somebody that, you know, was loyal to the Eme, and now he'd been victimized. And, you know, as time went on, he started seeing more of the treachery and the deception. It started to affect him. You know, he continued to push, but it had an effect on him. And like I told you guys in the beginning of this video, you know, once you get turned on that first time, it's something that you gotta come to grips with. You gotta, you know, you either gotta ask yourself, am I still in this? Can I still trust these guys? These guys tried to hurt me. They tried to stab me, or they did. They did. And it's, you know, is it just these specific individuals, or do I just lose interest in the whole, you know, the whole cause? Me being a sureño. He continued to push on, you know, as a loyal sureño, but he said his heart wasn't in it no more. He honestly felt like his heart wasn't in it, but he continued to push for as long as he could. He started to see things, you know, things started happening. So the other thing I forgot to tell you guys too is that when the sergeant pulled him out and he had this conversation with him, they also called a nurse to do, you know, to medically clear him. They wanted the nurse to see if he had any wounds. So obviously they seen something, somebody said something or something, but you know, he was able, according to him, he was able to, like, when the nurse came, he took his t-shirt off, he did a quick turn where, you know, he had some puncture wounds. He turned real quick and she missed it. So she medically cleared him and she didn't find nothing. But again, it didn't have no effect. They still put him on single cell status, and that was pretty much the end of that. So like I said, this caused a lot of the other sureños in that building to question him. They started questioning, hey, what did you tell the nurse? What did you go down there and tell these? Why are you on single cell status? It seems kind of fishy. You know, this goes all the way back to the first time when you had that incident with the paisa. Right after that, you end up getting pulled out to court. So they're bombarding him with questions like this. And he feels like they're questioning his loyalty. He's like, man, I didn't like being questioned, but I understood protocol and I went with it. It's like I asked, hey, you know, this is what I told the nurse. This is what I told the sergeant. I told you guys I had this case. They called me out. It was timing. I didn't have nothing to do with it. So he answered all the things that they were asking him. But, you know, he was still under that cloud of suspicion. But he still continued to function. He still continued to push. So later on, at some point, he would end up finding out what happened. Apparently, one of Artie's secretaries ended up getting caught with a bundle of kites. It was something like 115 kites that the secretary got caught with. And in that bundle, there was a kite that basically confirmed that he had got stabbed on the yard, that he got hit, and it identified the two individuals that hit him. And that's the reason why they ended up rolling him up, putting him on single cell status. However, in that same bundle, there was also another kite that said he wasn't supposed to get hit, that he was just supposed to get fined. When he heard about that, that made him feel betrayed even more, because he felt like, you know what, I wasn't even supposed to get hit, but these cats ended up hitting me anyway. I was supposed to get fined. So, you know, it was at that point that he really started to lose faith and confidence in his people. And he would end up getting shipped off to Pelican Bay. At some point, he got shipped off. Artie ended up getting transferred out as well. And coincidentally, he ended up in the same pod with Artie. How much of a coincidence is that? Pelican Bay is huge. The SHU program is massive. You can be up there for 10 years and never see somebody from your hood that's in, on the other, you be in on C side and somebody else be on D side, and you'll never see them during that entire 10 years. That's just how big it is. And it's not like you're coming out every day and there's a lot of traffic. That's just that's how it is up there. So he ends up in the same pod with Artie, and Artie's two doors down from him. And when he gets there, this by then he's got the information. He heard that it was Artie that put the green light on him. So he confronts him. He's like, hey man, he's like, I don't know if we got at him on paper, if he stopped by his cell, but he's like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do this to me, bro? I moved on the paisa. I did that for you. I've always been loyal. You're somebody I've always admired. Then you hurt me, bro. Why'd you have me hit like that? I didn't do nothing wrong. He said Artie denied it. All he did was he just completely denied it. He said he didn't have nothing to do with it. There's no reason for him to get hit. That, he lost a kite, and that's supposedly what all this was supposed to be about. Artie told him, you were supposed to get fined, and that's it. But I never authorized the green light on you. And he told him, he's like, come on, Artie. He's like, man, nothing happens on this yard without your stamp of approval. He's like, come on, bro. I know better than that. Your secretary. At some point he felt like he could only question him so much. He can't keep pressing Artie like that. This is a Mexican mafia member. So he just backed up. He's like, all right, you know what, man? If the dude doesn't want to be straight up and tell me, it is what it is, man. So he let it go. So it was around the time when Artie started to get in trouble. This was like when he was on his way out. Turi from Cucas, he ends up pulling up, and he lands in that same pod. And Smokey gets at him, and he tells him what happened over there in Corcoran. And I don't know if Artie ended up disappearing at that point, but that's the impression that I got. Like Artie moved, or he took off. Maybe he locked it up at that point. But when Turi heard about it, he was like, you know what? You don't owe no money. That was never supposed to happen to you. On behalf of my brother, I apologize. He said he apologized for him, but that Artie couldn't even apologize for doing what he did to him. He's like, Turi apologized for his own brother. He's like, that was never supposed to happen to you. Anyways, this guy respected Turi obviously for doing that, but he said again, his heart wasn't in it no more. He tried to continue to push, but it ended up taking all the fire out of his took all the fire out of his heart. From that point, he just wasn't feeling it. So he ended up locking it up. He walked away from the lifestyle. He checked in, and that's where he's at today. He's somewhere trying to turn his life in another direction because of the betrayal. Because of the everyday betrayal that, basically takes place in these types of criminal organizations. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's when your number comes up, it comes up. Whether it's something that you righteously did or somebody else pushed some cutthroat politics against you, like what happened with him. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens. And again, man, this guy, when he went out to court after he took off on that paisa, it looked funny, but even without proof, it put him under a cloud of suspicion, and that was enough for these guys to end up whacking this dude. They thought, he was probably cooperating, or he was giving up information. That's kind of when everything just everything went wayside from that point on. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story right here. I know it was kind of long, but I just wanted to get into the betrayal of this lifestyle. And there's a lot of parallels that I can relate to with this story right here. Obviously, you guys know my story. The betrayal and the deception is just, it comes with the territory. And I understand a lot of guys that are still, committed to their careers, and they fully believe in what they're striving for and what they represent. But until they've experienced that betrayal, once they've experienced themselves, then they understand. That's the unfortunate thing. Everybody at some point experiences that betrayal. Whether or not it ends up ending your career, or if you just were victimized and you kept on pushing. It's a cold game. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story right here. I got a lot of stories on deck that I'm going to be telling you guys. I appreciate everybody that's been tapping in with stories. Keep them coming too. If there's anybody out there that has stories about the Mexican Mafia that you're willing to share, and you want to get compensated for sharing those stories, and you will remain anonymous if that's what you want, tap in with me, boxerparadigm@gmail.com. All you got to do is share your story with me. I will compensate you for, giving me your time. Time is a commodity. Giving me your time and sharing the story with me. I will put the story out there. You guys are not going to put it out there. I'm going to put it out there. So you will stay in the shadows. Anyways, like I said, we got a lot of stories, some bangers. It's surprising, it's mind-blowing, some of the stories that I got, some of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. I got enough stories to last me for a long time, for the long haul. So even though we got this many right here, I'm going to be greedy, man. I want more. Keep them coming. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. I will try to get back with you guys again on another one tomorrow. I'm going to try to get out an Inner Demons right now. I hope you guys enjoyed your weekend. For those of you that won the raffle, tap in with us. We need your mailing information to get that, to get the stuff out to you guys. With that being said, this is your boy B, and I'm out.